The galaxy expelled the rebels, but Earth welcomed them. The radar showed 17 objects that had no business being there. Marcus Oyalaran had not slept. His coffee had gone cold twice already, and the vending machine down the hall had started making a sound like a small animal in distress. The UN Emergency Refugee Integration Bureau office smelled like printer toner and old decisions, which was its normal state, but tonight something different had settled into the walls. 17 vessels, no transponder codes, no registration numbers in any cooperative database Earth had been given access to in the 6 years since first contact, descending in a controlled pattern over the Moroccan desert at a speed that said careful, not crashing, 83 kilometers southeast of Agadir. His supervisor, Owen Clark, appeared in the doorway with the expression of a man watching a slow-moving problem arrive that he had specifically arranged his career to avoid. "Tell me those are weather balloons," Owen said. "Those are 17 very large weather balloons," Marcus said. Owen left to find someone with more authority to be appropriately concerned. Marcus picked up his jacket. He drove out himself. 3 separate department notifications came in telling him to wait for the assessment team. He read all 3 in the parking lot, set his phone on the passenger seat face down, and drove toward the desert. The assessment team was coming from Geneva. The military observation unit was deploying from the base outside Marrakesh. Neither would arrive first. Marcus had learned, in a previous life doing work he did not discuss over dinner, that the people who arrived first at anything decided what story got told. He parked where the road ran out and walked. The ships were not what he expected. They were large, but not in the clean, deliberate way the cooperative's first vessels had been 6 years ago, those ships appearing over the Pacific with the confident presentation of something designed to make humans feel small. These ships had a different quality, hull plates in mismatched colors, repair welds running across the surface like lines pressed into old skin. One ship had a section of its lower hull wrapped in what appeared to be heavy industrial packing material, held in place with cables that had no business being structural. Surviving, that was the word that came to Marcus, standing in the dark desert with the cold coming off the sand. Not impressive, not threatening, surviving. The main ramp of the lead ship lowered, slow and grinding. She came out first. Marcus had the cooperative species files. He had spent the better part of 2 years reading them, the dense biological and cultural records the cooperative had shared with Earth as part of what they called a courtesy integration package. He had seen photographs of the Vreth. He had not been prepared for the real thing. She was smaller than the photographs. 7 limbs, the front 2 functioning approximately like arms, the rest distributed along her lower body in a way that made her movement look fluid, more like something flowing between positions than walking through them. Her skin shifted color as she moved, slow pulses of blue and green in the dark. He would learn later that those patterns were not decoration. She stopped 10 meters from him. She looked at him the way Marcus had seen people look at border officers, calculating, measuring the human on the other side of the process for the specific type of refusal that was coming and how much it would cost to survive it. Marcus knew that look. His father had worn it at enough checkpoints. He said, "You picked a difficult Tuesday for this." The small node behind what might have been her ear hummed quietly for 2 seconds. She said, "We had very few Tuesdays remaining." Marcus looked at the ships. Behind her, more figures appeared on the ramps, not all Vreth, other shapes he had no classification for, eyes that caught the moonlight at angles that did not match anything in his reference files, a species so small that 3 of them had climbed together near the ramp edge just to see over it. He took the intake form from his jacket pocket. Standard issue. He had carried blank ones everywhere for 11 years, from his first processing job in a camp on the Turkish border to 3 different desk assignments that were supposed to be promotions and felt mostly like longer hours. When people arrived at borders with nothing, the first thing you gave them was a form, because a form meant the system had looked at you and decided you existed. "What is your name?" he asked. She said, "Vel." He wrote it down. He asked the next question, then the next. Behind Vel, the movement on the ramps organized itself into the patient, practiced flow of people who had been waiting a long time to stop moving and were not yet sure they were allowed to. The transmission had come in during the descent. Marcus had played it on his phone on the drive out, his translation software taking 15 seconds to process it into something his brain could hold. "Does your planet have a word for asylum?" He had stared at his coffee when he heard it. "Why Earth?" Marcus asked. "Of everything in range, every system, every world, why here?" Vel's bioluminescence shifted into something new. He had no name for it yet. "The cooperative briefed every integrated world when you made contact," she said. "They described you as Category 3, unready, too attached to individuals over systems, too willing to make choices based on what you felt rather than what your assessments showed." She paused. "They said it as a warning," she said. "We heard it as directions." Marcus looked down at the form. He looked at the 17 ships. He looked at the people on the ramps, still waiting, still not moving, watching him the way you watch someone who is holding the only door. He clicked his pen. He checked the box, asylum claim, credible. He filed it remotely, on his phone, standing in the desert at 3 in the morning before the assessment team landed. Owen called twice before sunrise. Marcus let it ring. He was still filling out forms. Vel sat with him on the running board of his car while he worked. She did not speak much. She watched the desert horizon begin to lighten from black to deep blue to the first pale edge of something almost gold. When the assessment team's vehicles appeared on the horizon as dust and headlights, Vel stood and looked at Marcus. "Will they take it back?" she said. "The form." Marcus folded his copy and put it in his jacket pocket. "They can try," he said. The sun came up over the desert. It painted the 17 battered ships in orange and gold, and they stood there taking it like people who had not been sure they would see another sunrise and were not going to look away from this one. Marcus had a lot more forms to fill. He got started. Ambassador Soth Cariel of the Galactic Cooperative arrived on a Thursday with a file, an official title, and the particular energy of someone who had come to correct a mistake before it became a precedent. He was not unfriendly. That was the first thing Marcus noticed. Unfriendly he could have worked with. Soth Cariel was precise. He moved through the UN briefing room with the steady confidence of someone who had done this exact thing on other worlds and found that it always resolved the same way. He set the file on the table. "You processed intake claims for 93 individuals and 4 species proscribed under Galactic Cooperative Statute 14C, he said, "before your government was notified, before standard assessment protocols were completed." "The assessment team was 40 minutes out," Marcus said. "The procedure exists for a reason. So does the form I filled in." Soth Cariel looked at him with careful patience. "There are active enforcement warrants," he said. 17 vessels, 93 individuals, 4 species. Earth has received them without full information, which the cooperative understands. That situation can still be resolved without consequence to your integration process. He opened the file. Marcus had the file too. He had read it at 2 in the morning in his office with the lights down and a drink he had not finished. Soth Cariel read the charges aloud. Marcus followed on his translated copy. Charge 1, unlawful resistance of mandatory genetic compliance, Protocol 7. The cooperative had ordered a genetic review of the Vreth home colony, compulsory, non-negotiable under integrated world statutes. The file called it optimization sampling. The Vreth had voted unanimously to refuse. Then they had sealed the facility and declined to open it. Charge 2, unauthorized obstruction of stellar reclamation. The Vreth moon had been designated a resource territory, mining schedule filed and approved. The schedule contained no provisions for the 40,000 people living on the moon. The Vreth had loaded those people into ships and cleared the moon before the mining fleet arrived. The file called this theft of registered resource territory. Marcus set his pen down when he read that word. He picked it back up. Charge 3, harboring and concealment of proscribed species. The other 4 species in the cargo holds, each officially listed as ecologically redundant, each carrying a cooperative designation that his translation notes rendered after 3 layers of processing as scheduled for humane processing. The Vreth had been hiding them for 3 years, in cargo holds fitted with life support, moving when the cooperative's detection patrols came close, feeding them from their own supplies. Sothcariel finished. He had the satisfied expression of a professional who had completed a task in the expected order. Marcus's colleague Kate Brennan was at the corner of the table with her notepad. She had been very still for the last 10 minutes. Marcus could see her deciding something. The room was quiet. So the charges are, Marcus said, refusing a medical procedure, moving civilians out of a demolition site, and hiding people from a list. Sothcariel said, those are considerable oversimplifications. I know, Marcus said, bad habit. Owen, sitting in the second row, had the expression of a man calculating in real time which parts of this situation were his responsibility, and which ones he could reasonably attribute to Marcus alone. Sothcariel placed a second document on the table. Earth's integration assessment has been paused, he said. Full cooperation with extradition procedures will resume the process without penalty. Earth has 72 hours. He looked at Marcus with calm, professional directness. I understand you may have personal feelings about this, he said. Professional ones, Marcus said. Same thing in this case. After Sothcariel left, the room stayed quiet for a long moment. Then Owen said Marcus's name in the specific tone he used when he wanted to sound calm and was not. Marcus drove to Agadir. Kate called him an hour in. I read the underlying order, she said, the actual cooperative document behind the genetic compliance charge, not just the charge sheet, the original authorization. And the optimization sampling. It was a population review for hereditary markers. A pause. The markers were identified in the cooperative's own behavioral research as associated with organized resistance to institutional authority. The road noise filled the car. They were screening for people likely to say no, Marcus said. That is what the document says, Kate said, with different words but yes. And the species on the humane processing list. All 4 had histories of organized opposition to cooperative expansion in their home sectors. It is in the background files. You have to go 3 levels deep to find it. Marcus drove. He thought about his father. He did not go there often. It cost too much. But there it was, his father across a desk from a man with a file, being told that certain administrative irregularities in his records required review. Social recalibration, different century, different planet now. Same desk. Same file. He reached Agadir just after noon. The converted agricultural complex outside the city had been chaotic when he left. It had organized itself the way displaced people always organize themselves when given the smallest amount of structure to work with. Areas for sleeping, areas for meals. Children had found the open courtyard near the eastern building and were doing something that might have been a game with flat stones. Vel found him in the second courtyard. She looked different in daylight, less coiled, still watchful, but with a quality that was closer to stillness than bracing. You came back, she said. I need to understand something, Marcus said. When you left, when you loaded the ships and went, you knew charges would be filed. Yes. You knew you would be pursued. Yes. You came here anyway, to a Category 3 world, no galactic standing, no enforcement record. You came here knowing we might send you back." Vel was quiet. "We went to 7 other worlds," she said. 6 told us to leave before we landed. The 7th let us land and then sent our coordinates to the cooperative." She looked at Marcus steadily. 7 months before we arrived here, we found a transmission from your planet, a speech, your Secretary General. She was speaking about a refugee situation on the other side of your own world." Marcus waited. She said, "The measure of a civilization is not what it builds when things are easy. It is who it opens its doors to when things are hard." The courtyard was quiet. Behind Vel, 3 of the small species that had been in the cargo holds were sitting in a patch of afternoon sun near the east wall. Just sitting, doing nothing in particular, sitting in the sun. "We played that speech on the ships," Vel said, "every week for 7 months." Marcus sat down on the low concrete wall. He sat there for a while without saying anything. "Then we have 72 hours. "I know," Vel said. "It is going to get complicated." "It has been complicated," she said, "for a long time." He stood up. "Tell me about Ocean," he said. The name had appeared in the intake forms. Vreth male, approximate age 29, listed occupation, communications and systems specialist. "He is very clever," Vel said, "and he does not always understand when he is making people uncomfortable with how clever he is." "Good," Marcus said. "I need very clever and I can handle uncomfortable." He had calls to make. He also had a growing, quiet, concrete belief forming in the back of his mind that the 72 hours were not going to go the way Soth Cariel had calculated. He did not yet know exactly what they were going to do. He knew they were not going to do what Soth Cariel expected. That was enough to start. The Global Emergency Council convened at 6 in the morning in a room built for diplomatic photographs and comfortable disagreements. What it received instead was 53 delegates who had all read the same file and were now sitting with it in different ways. Marcus was not in the chamber. He was not a delegate. He was the person who had filed the forms and was therefore technically the cause of the meeting, and Owen had very politely suggested that his presence in the chamber itself might complicate the atmosphere. Marcus had agreed. He sat in an observation corridor with Kate, a cup of coffee, and a live audio feed. The file had gone out to all 53 delegates at 4 in the morning, not just the charge sheet, the full document, the optimization sampling authorization, the 3 levels deep of background files. Kate had compiled it, and Marcus had sent it with a cover memo that was 2 sentences long. The first sentence said, "This is the complete cooperative file on the 93 individuals and 4 species currently in Earth's care." The second sentence said, "We have been given 72 hours to decide what kind of world we are." Owen had not approved that second sentence. Marcus had sent it anyway. The debate in the chamber was not what anyone expected. No speeches about human destiny, no declarations. Mostly it was tired people in a room reading the same document and going, one by one, very quiet in the specific way that happens when something lands and stays landed. The delegate from a coastal nation in the Pacific, a man named Leon Ward, who had been in the council for 11 years and was known for saying very little and meaning all of it, stood up at the 40-minute mark. He did not make a speech. He said, "We know what they did wrong. The question I want us to answer is what we do wrong if we send them back." He sat down. The room stayed with that. Marcus sat in the corridor listening to the silence on the audio feed. Kate was writing something in her notepad. He did not look at what. Soth Cariel had been given a chamber seat as official observer. He had arrived expecting to be present for a resolution. He had brought a secondary document for the handoff procedure. His position was neutral and professional and completely unprepared for what Leon Ward's 12 words did to the air in that room. The delegate from a northern European nation spoke next. She laid out the trade consequences methodically. Navigation access, suspended. Integration track, paused. 6 years of careful diplomatic work with the cooperative, at risk. She was not arguing for one side. She was making sure everyone understood the cost. The delegate from a South American nation stood and said he understood the cost, and then asked her to look at the background files on page 47, third subsection, which described the genetic marker screening protocol in language that used the same structural logic as certain historical documents from his own countries, past, that he was not going to name, because everyone in the room already knew which ones he meant. The room went quiet again. The thing about that silence, Marcus thought, listening through the feed, was that it was not the silence of people who did not know what to do. It was the silence of people who did know and were sitting with what knowing was going to cost. Different thing entirely. At 1 hour and 12 minutes, a delegate named Nina Patel, who had been silent until this point and who had worked in humanitarian response for 20 years before entering diplomacy, stood up and spoke for 4 minutes. She described 3 cases from her field work, not in policy language, in actual terms, what happened to people who were sent back. She was not angry when she described them. That made it worse. She sat down. Sothcariel asked to address the council. He was given the floor. He was measured and reasonable and correct about every technical point he made. He acknowledged the weight of the situation. He offered an extension of the 72 hours to allow for a more thorough assessment process. He was, Marcus thought, listening from the corridor, a genuinely decent person doing a genuinely difficult job with complete professional skill. Leon Ward asked him one question when he finished. He said, the 4 species scheduled for humane processing. What does that mean specifically? Sothcariel explained the cooperative's ecological redundancy protocols, population management, sustainable galactic resource allocation. He used calm words in a careful order. Leon Ward said, thank you, and sat down. The vote was called at the 4-hour mark. Marcus heard it come through the feed, simple numbers, 41 for, 9 against, 3 abstentions. Earth was keeping them. He sat in the corridor for a moment without moving. Kate looked up from her notepad. 4 hours, she said. Sothcariel gave us 3 days. He calculated based on what the trade consequences would do, Marcus said. He did not calculate for Leon Ward. Kate capped her pen. What happens now, she said. Now the cooperative acts, Marcus said. The integration track stops. Trade channels close. Navigation rights go. He stood up. How long can Earth manage without those? Kate asked. I have no idea, Marcus said, but I know who I need to talk to. He took the elevator down and walked to the vehicle waiting to take him back to Agadir. He called Owen on the way. I saw the vote, Owen said. I know you did. You're not surprised. No, Marcus said, are you? Owen was quiet for a moment. My grandfather came here from Jamaica in 1963, Owen said. He had 2 bags and a reference letter for a job that turned out not to exist. Someone at the port took him to a church hall and gave him a meal and helped him find a room. He stopped. No, Owen said quietly, I am not surprised. They were quiet together on the phone for a moment. Then Owen said, I am extremely concerned about the practical implications. That is why they pay you, Marcus said. They do not pay me nearly enough, Owen said. Marcus arrived in Agadir as the sun was setting. He found Vel in the courtyard where the children were still playing their stone game, which had developed rules and a scoring system at some point during the afternoon. The council voted, Marcus said. Vel watched him. You are staying, he said. Her bioluminescence shifted. He was starting to learn a few of the patterns now, this one he had seen on the ramp that first night. Tomorrow it gets harder, Marcus said. Yes, Vel said. Are you ready? She looked at the children with their stones, at the figures in the windows of the buildings, at the sky going orange and deep blue above the desert. "We have been ready for a long time," she said. "We just needed somewhere to be ready in." Marcus went to find Ocean. They had work to do. The sanctions arrived like weather, not as a single event, as a system. The cooperative's first communication came 3 days after the vote. Formal, precise. Earth's integration assessment officially suspended indefinitely. All cooperative-affiliated trade routes rerouted pending review. Navigation rights in cooperative-controlled corridors, which covered about 60% of what Earth's emerging deep space program had been planning to use, suspended without a timeline. The communication was 2 paragraphs long. It took about 30 seconds to read. It took about 6 months to feel. Marcus sat in his Geneva office, working through the economic projections that Owen's team had put together. Agricultural yield losses in regions that had been using cooperative-developed soil management techniques. Medical supply chain disruptions for 4 compounds that had come through cooperative trade channels and had no current Earth-produced alternatives. The Deep Space Program, 4 satellites in the planning stage and 3 facilities under construction, was looking at a 10 to 15-year setback in development timeline. 12 pages of projections, each one of them real, each one of them the cost of 41 votes. Marcus read all 12 pages, then he put the file down and went to find Ocean. Ocean was in the communications room that had been established in the Agadir facility. He was sitting in front of 4 screens simultaneously and eating something that looked like a flattened rectangle and had been synthesized from the facility kitchen's attempts to approximate Vreth dietary requirements. He was eating it with the resigned expression of someone who has decided that sustenance is sustenance. He was 29 years old, and he had broken the cooperative's basic navigational blackout on Earth in 11 weeks using equipment that was not designed for the purpose. "The agricultural projection," Marcus said, "the soil management techniques we are losing, can any of those be replicated?" Ocean looked at him with the specific expression he wore when someone asked him a question he had already answered inside his own head. 3 of the 7 techniques, yes, he said, they are not complex. The cooperative made them appear complex to maintain the supply relationship. I can write the base methodology in 2 days. 2 days, Marcus said. 1.5, Ocean said, if you get me a different food. Marcus got him a different food. That was the beginning of what Marcus would later call, in the report he eventually wrote about this period, the strange season. Not a good name. He could not find a better one. The sanctions were real. He did not pretend otherwise to anyone who asked. The trade losses were real. The navigation restriction was real. 3 other species Earth had been building cautious preliminary contact relationships with went silent within a week of the cooperative's announcement, because that was what happened when a Category 3 world made a Category 9 jurisdictional error. The rest of the galaxy waited to see if it would be corrected. What the cooperative had not calculated was what lived in the Agadir facility. Ocean and 3 Vreth communications specialists rebuilt Earth's navigational blackout workaround into a functional deep space relay in 8 weeks. They used components that were not designed to work together, operating principles the cooperative had classified as unavailable to Category 3 worlds, and 2 commercial satellites that Earth had already launched for unrelated purposes. When Marcus asked how Ocean had accessed the classified operating principles, Ocean looked mildly puzzled and said he had assumed they were publicly available since they were based on mathematics any secondary student should know. The morph biologists, a species physically small enough that they worked at modified children's desk height, with minds like filing systems that never lost a folder, asked Kate one afternoon if they could review Earth's medical research databases. They spent 3 weeks cross-referencing. When they came to Marcus with the results, they brought a document 40 pages long and an apology that it had taken so long because the translation layer had slowed their work. The document contained 17 medical treatment protocols they had developed in the cooperative's biological archives that were directly applicable to human physiology. Conditions Earth's medicine was currently managing rather than solving. We did not develop these for humans, the eldest Morth explained through translation. We developed them for our own people. The underlying biology is different, but the mechanism is similar enough. We wanted to share them. Why? Marcus asked. The Morth looked at him for a moment. On every other world, she said. We spent our time waiting to be tolerated, trying not to take up space, trying to make ourselves small enough that no one would object to our being present. She looked around the room. At the window where 3 Skehari engineers were reviewing blueprints spread on the floor. At the courtyard visible beyond the glass, where 2 Vreth were teaching a group of children from the nearby town a counting system that used base 12 instead of base 10. You argued with us about whether we needed warmer clothing, the Morth said. In the first week, you sent 3 messages arguing about the correct temperature for the accommodation buildings. We compromised at 19 degrees, Marcus said. You argued, she said. You did not just decide for us. You complained that we were wrong about the cold, and we complained that you were wrong about the heat, and then someone found a number in the middle, and everyone was equally unhappy. We had not been argued with in 11 years. Marcus sat with that for a moment. The Skehari engineers, 6 of them, tall with grey-toned skin, carrying a structural engineering tradition that predated the cooperative's founding by about 400 years, had taken a look at the geothermal power project outside Reykjavik that Earth's energy teams had been trying to make viable for 3 years. They had asked politely whether anyone would object to them reviewing the design specifications. 2 weeks later, they submitted a 12-page revision document that solved 3 separate load-bearing problems that had made the project economically unworkable. The project broke ground 6 weeks after that. The cooperative's intelligence division was watching. Marcus knew this because Ossian told him with the flat certainty of someone who had been watching watchers for most of his life. The cooperative was running routine surveillance on Earth's communications, standard monitoring for a Category 3 world, elevated slightly given the current situation, nothing aggressive, just watching. Ossian had been watching them watching. He came to Marcus one morning with a printed translation of a cooperative internal assessment document. He set it on Marcus's desk and pointed at one section. Marcus read it. The cooperative's analysis of Earth's situation described humanity using a term that needed 4 lines of translation notes to render properly. The closest English phrase the notes offered was, "A civilization that mistakes emotional commitment for strategic advantage." Marcus taped it to the wall above his desk. He wrote underneath it in his own handwriting, "Or we just have long memories for who locked the doors." Kate came in, read the wall, and said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "How many days until the Skehari generator goes live?" 3 weeks, Marcus said. The Morth treatment protocols are those moving through Health Ministry review. 2 are in accelerated review. The other 15 are in standard process, which means approximately forever, but Kate from legal is apparently very motivated this month. Kate nodded slowly, and Ossian's navigation relay. Functional, not elegant but functional. So when the cooperative looks at us, she said, they see a world in economic difficulty from the sanctions, which is accurate. And they also see a world that is somehow solving problems faster than it was 3 months ago. Yes, Marcus said. Because we have help we were not supposed to have. Because we let people in the door, Marcus said. Kate sat down. Soth Cariel is going to come back, she said. I know. It will not be a conversation next time. I know that too. She looked at the wall, at the printed assessment document and Marcus's handwriting underneath it. Did you know any of this was going to happen? She said. When you filed that form in the desert, did you know? Marcus thought about it honestly. I knew that Vel looked at me the way my father looked at border checkpoints, he said. I knew what was in the cargo holds. I knew what the charges actually said when you read them plainly. He looked at the wall. I knew that if we sent them back, we would be the seventh world, he said. I could not do that. Vel appeared in the doorway. She had started coming to the Geneva office 2 days a week, working with the integration team on the formal process for establishing the Agadir facility as a recognized settlement. She was better at paperwork than most of the humans on the floor, which Owen had noted with an expression somewhere between impressed and professionally threatened. She looked at the wall, she read the cooperative assessment, then she read Marcus's handwriting. Her bioluminescence shifted. He knew that color now. They will come, she said, in the end, not diplomats. I know, Marcus said. Are you afraid? Marcus looked out the window at the Geneva afternoon. Ordinary clouds, people walking below, a city doing its city things with no idea that in a facility in Morocco, something was being built that the galaxy had not accounted for. A little, he said, not of them. I'm afraid of getting all the way to the end of this and making a mistake that costs people who trusted us. Vel was quiet for a moment. That is not fear, she said. That is responsibility. They feel similar from inside them. She went to find Owen and ask him about the settlement zoning documents. Marcus turned back to his desk. 3 weeks later, the Skehari generator came online outside Reykjavik and fed power into the grid for the first time. The project manager called Marcus from the site. Is it working? Marcus asked. It is absolutely working, the project manager said. He sounded like a man who had not expected to be making this call. Marcus, it is absolutely working. Marcus told him that was good and hung up before his voice did something he would regret. He sat at his desk. He thought about what was coming. Then he picked up his pen and started working on the forms that would be needed when it arrived. The fleet appeared at the edge of Earth's system on a Tuesday. Marcus thought about Vel's first words on the desert ramp when he heard the report. He thought about them for exactly 3 seconds. Then he picked up his phone and called General Dean Harlow. Harlow ran the Joint Space Observation Command that had been established with minimal ceremony and minimal budget 6 weeks after the Vreth arrived. He was a compact man with gray hair and the measured voice of someone who had spent 30 years making decisions that could not be undone. I see them, Harlow said when Marcus called. 11 vessels, not cooperative patrol class. This is their enforcement fleet. How long until they are in range? At current speed, 14 hours. Are they moving fast? No, Harlow said, and there was something in his voice that Marcus recognized as the specific calm of a professional who is more concerned than he is letting on. They are moving at exactly the pace you move when you want someone to have time to think about what is coming. Marcus said, I need to be at the communications facility. I assumed, Harlow said, a car is already outside your building. Marcus got his jacket. He opened his desk drawer and took out the original intake form. Tuesday in the desert. Coffee ring on the corner. He did not know exactly why he took it. He took it anyway. He called Owen on the way. I know, Owen said before Marcus spoke. I have been up since 3. Is there a plan? There is a plan, Marcus said. A real one or a Marcus plan? A Marcus plan, with Kate involved, so structurally it is better than usual. Wonderful, Owen said, and the word carried approximately 11 layers of meaning. The communications facility outside Geneva had been upgraded 3 times since the Vreth arrived, mostly through Ocean's persistent suggestions and 2 grants from the Deep Space Program. It looked nothing like it had 18 months ago. Half the equipment had Vreth components in it. This had triggered several regulatory review processes that Marcus had processed, approved, and moved past at a pace that Owen described as entrepreneurial and the review board described as irregular. Ocean was already there when Marcus arrived. He was at his main console with the expression he wore when something was interesting to him, which Marcus had learned to read as meaning he had already solved most of it and was watching it complete. Kate was there too. She had the folder with the full legal documentation, the settlement records, the integration filing that had been working through the UN formal process for 8 months, the medical research papers, 312 of them now, submitted to Earth's scientific journals by the Morph biologists and Skehari engineers, and 2 smaller species that had quietly turned out to have expertise nobody asked about and everyone needed. The cooperative fleet held position at the edge of the system. 12 hours passed. Then the hailing frequency opened. Marcus had prepared to speak to Soth Cariel. He had built specific things to say to Soth Cariel over 18 months of thinking about this moment. The face on the screen was not Soth Cariel. Someone else, a cooperative enforcement commander, ranking insignia Marcus did not have the reference files for. Older, with the expression of someone who had not come to negotiate and needed that to be understood from the first sentence. He introduced himself as Fleet Commander Oran Veth. He said Earth had been assessed under Galactic Cooperative Emergency Protocol 7, reserved for Category 3 or below worlds that had committed Category 9 or above jurisdictional violations. He said this in the tone of someone who expected the words to close the conversation before it opened. Marcus said, "I understand. I want to show you something." He held up the intake form. Oran Veth looked at it. "This is the first form I filed on the night of arrival," Marcus said. "Agadir, Morocco, 3 in the morning before the assessment team landed. Date, time, registration number, and 1 checked box. Asylum claim credible." He set it down. 18 months ago, Marcus said, 93 people and 4 species landed on our planet in 17 ships held together with cables and determination. They had been turned away or reported to the authorities by every other world they approached. They came here because our Secretary General gave a speech about opening doors when conditions are hard. Oran Veth said, "Earth's compliance with the extradition order is the only matter relevant to this communication." "I have a different view of what is relevant," Marcus said. "Let me tell you what has happened since that Tuesday." He talked for 4 minutes, not a speech, not a performance. He spoke the way he wrote reports, facts in order with no decoration. The Skehari geothermal project, now powering 200,000 homes in Iceland. The Morph treatment protocols, 2 already cleared by health review, 11 more in process, affecting conditions that Earth's medicine had been managing for decades without solving. The navigation relay, built from commercial satellites and Vreth engineering knowledge, providing Earth's deep space program with functional pathfinding capability that had cut the development setback caused by the cooperative's navigation suspension from 15 years to 3. The sanctions were real, Marcus said. "I want to be clear about that. The impact was real. 6 months ago we were looking at significant losses. We are not looking at that anymore." He paused. "Not because the sanctions failed," he said, "because the people you want us to hand over fixed the problems your sanctions caused. Not because we asked them to. Not because there was any exchange or negotiation. Because they have been watching humans for 18 months and they decided that helping was what you did when someone opened the door." Silence on the channel. Oran Veth said, "These individuals are subjects of active enforcement warrants." "I know," Marcus said. "Earth has no standing to contest those warrants under galactic cooperative law." "I know that too." "Then you understand that this ends one of 2 ways." Marcus looked at the screen. "I understand you think that," he said. He stepped back from the camera. "I want to show you something else," he said. He had arranged this with Harlow 2 days earlier, after Ocean confirmed the fleet was on its way, not a military arrangement. Harlow had been very clear twice in writing that the Joint Space Observation Command did not have the capability or the mandate to engage a cooperative enforcement fleet, and that attempting to do so would be catastrophic. Marcus had said, "I know, that is not what I am asking for." What was visible on the external cameras of the communications facility, the feed that Ocean had made certain was live and transmissible on the open hailing frequency, was the field outside Agadir. Not the facility itself, the field around it. In 18 months, the intake facility had stopped being a facility and become something without a clean official name. A settlement, a campus, 17 buildings where there had been 3, gardens in the courtyard growing things from 2 different planets using a soil composition the Morth had developed from combined research. Children, human, Vreth, 2 other species, in the outdoor space with their stone game that had its own rulebook and a seasonal championship and arguments about scoring that crossed 3 language systems. Around the field, outside the settlement perimeter, were vehicles. Military vehicles, yes. 43 nations had sent units in the 8 days since the fleet was detected. Harlow had coordinated it with the efficiency of a man who had been waiting for something real to do for 18 months. They were positioned in a broad perimeter, not aimed at anything, not arranged in an attack formation, simply there. The way a wall is there. But there were other vehicles too. Private cars parked in rows that stretched beyond what the camera could show, people standing near them, looking at the sky. Marcus had not organized that. Nobody had organized that. It had happened the way things happen when information is public and people decide for themselves what it means to them. Journalists from 60 countries had been covering Agadir for a year and a half. The Morth treatment protocols had names attached to them now, patients who had recovered, doctors who were publishing results and giving interviews. The Skehari engineers had their own press coverage. Ocean had become, through no intention of anyone involved, something between a minor celebrity and a folk hero, because he had fixed the navigation blackout and then given a 3-minute interview in which his dry, precise humor had translated so well that the clip had been watched 300 million times by people who found in it something they recognized. The people in the field had not come because Marcus asked them to. They had come because they had read the same files the delegates had read. Oran Veth looked at the camera feed. His assessment software calculated the military positioning and returned a threat rating: significant, manageable. His assessment software had no variable for rows of private cars, for people who had driven out to a field in Morocco on a Tuesday for no strategic reason, and every personal one. The feed showed them standing in the afternoon light, looking up at a sky that held 11 enforcement vessels and did not look away from it. Oran Veth said nothing for a long moment. Marcus said, "You will note that I have not threatened you. I have not made a military claim. I do not have the standing to make one, and I would not if I did." He picked up the intake form. "What I have done," he said, "is file paperwork, lots of it. The original intake form you can see in my hand. The asylum claim approval, filed through the UN process, currently in formal legal review. The settlement establishment documents. The research publication records. The integration filings, 341 pages, submitted 8 months ago and currently being processed by a committee that has been working on Saturdays." He held the form for a moment. "This is what we do," he said. "We file forms. We argue about building temperatures. We have 18 months of documented arguments about whether the east courtyard needs more lighting, whether the kitchen ventilation is adequate, whether the stone game in the south yard presents a safety concern." He set the form on the desk. "We are not a Category 3 world," he said. "Technically, by your criteria, yes, but your criteria measure technological integration and cooperative compliance. They do not measure what we are actually good at." He looked at the screen. "We are good at finding this fine," he said. "Humans, we have survived things that should have ended us over and over throughout our entire history, and the mechanism was always the same. Someone opened a door. Someone filed a form. Someone argued about building temperatures until a compromise was reached at 19 degrees, and everyone was equally unhappy, but nobody was cold. The communications room was very quiet. Kate had the folder open in her lap, but was not looking at it. Ocean was watching the screen with his head slightly tilted, which was the expression he wore when he was watching something he found genuinely surprising. Vel was standing behind Marcus. He had not told her to be there. She had come. Oran Veth said, "You are asking the cooperative to close 17 enforcement warrants." "No," Marcus said. "I am asking you to look at that camera feed and decide if closing those warrants costs you anything real." He let that sit. "The people in those cars are not going home," he said. "The 43 military units in that field are under orders that were not mine to give and are not mine to rescind. What happens if you proceed is not a military engagement that you win. It is a record." He looked directly at the camera. "It is a file," he said, "with a date on it and a checked box, and the entire planet watching what you put in it." The fleet held position. 1 hour. 2. 3. Marcus drank his coffee. Vel sat beside him at the console. She did not hold his hand. She was close enough that it counted. Ocean monitored the fleet's positioning and ate his improved synthesized food, and said nothing. Kate read the settlement documents again, not because she needed to, because she needed something to do with her hands. At the 3-hour mark, Oran Veth opened the channel. He said, "The cooperative will be reviewing Earth's Category 3 classification." He said it without emotion, the tone of a man delivering a message that had been decided somewhere above him and was now being communicated downward. "Pending review," he said, "enforcement action is suspended." He closed the channel. The fleet began to move, slowly, at the precise pace of something that wanted the record to show it had not rushed. The communications room was quiet for about 5 seconds. Then Kate said, "Pending review." "Pending review," Marcus agreed. "That is not the same as dropped." "No," Marcus said, "it is not." "So this is not over." "Not even close," he said. "There are months of review process coming, possibly years. The integration track will have conditions. The warrants will be suspended, not dismissed. This is the beginning of a very long argument." He looked at Vel. Her bioluminescence was doing the color he knew now, the one she had first done on the ramp in the desert, the one that existed in a specific context, the one that, when he had finally asked her to explain it, she had said could not be translated exactly, but the nearest meaning was, "I did not think there would be more." Maury sunrises, Maury Tuesdays, Maury cold mornings, and stone games and arguments about building temperatures. "Maury, we have a great deal of work to do," Marcus said. "Yes," Vel said. He turned back to his desk. He pulled out a blank intake form, old habit, he carried them everywhere. At the top of the form, in the field marked Status Update, he wrote, "Ongoing." He looked at it. Then he wrote underneath it, in his own handwriting just for himself, "Above my pay grade, always was, do it anyway." He filed it. Forms love the living. He had always believed that. Standing in the communications facility in Geneva, with Ocean eating his synthesized food and Kate reading documents she already knew, and Vel's bioluminescence cycling through colors, he was still learning. 18 months of sunrises he had not expected, in a building that smelled like printer toner and decisions that had somehow turned out right. He believed it more than he ever had. He believed it more than anything. He started on the next form.